Hey there everybody. For your project this semester we're going to be using Git as a source control provider. Specifically we're going to be using Bitbucket.org to handle all of your source control and documentation and issue tracking. But Visual Studio 2010 does not support using Git as a source control provider natively. So this video is a short tutorial on how to get Visual Studio set up to use Git for source control. So the first thing you need to do is download Git itself. There is a Google code repository that has a download, has an installer for Windows. This will have a link on the website or in the video description. And so you need to go ahead and download this and install it. It's a pretty straightforward process, but there's a couple different things that you need to do in the installer to make sure that it works with Visual Studio. But the first thing we need to do is download this and install it. And there's a few different things that we need to do here. Let's see here. Okay, so adjusting your path environment, I highly suggest that you at least have run git from the Windows command prompt. It's really nice. If you want to, you can also run the included Unix tools, which are kind of cool, but at least have this option. Leave this as is. You'll want to check out Windows style, but commit Unix style line endings. And we'll wait for that to install. It shouldn't take that long. Okay. Now the next step we need to do is we need to configure Git to use your Bitbucket information. So go ahead and open up the Git bash. We need to enter a couple of configuration details. The first of which is your your Bitbucket username and email. So the first thing you'll want to do is type git config, and then we're going to set it as a global variable, and we're going to add your name in here. This is whatever shows up in commit logs as your name. So for example, hold on, that won't work. This guy. That's what shows up here when you commit things. So put in your name and enter, and that's configured. The next thing we need to do is add your email address. And this email address here should be whatever you used to sign up with Bitbucket. If you want to enter a different email address, you certainly can, but you will need to go into Bitbucket and add that as an alternate email address. Okay, and that's all the configuration we need to do for Git itself. Next, we're going to set up Visual Studio. Now Visual Studio, like I said before, only natively supports using Team Foundation Server as the source control. So we're going to go into Extension Manager, and we're going to use an online extension that someone else has written for Visual Studio. So click on Online Gallery, then type Git in the search box, and this first one is the one that we want, Git Source Control Provider. We're going to download that, and it should install pretty quickly. And then you'll have to restart Visual Studio, but that's not a problem. Okay, here we go. Now the next thing you need to do is you need to go to, it is Tools, Options, then under Source Control, plugin selection and change from Visual Studio TFS to Git Source Control Provider. And that'll open up a couple of windows, those are fine. And if you've already configured Git like we just did, these two fields should be filled in already. And that's all that we need to do from Visual Studio. Do a few things here. Okay, so up to this point, this is something that everybody should do. Now the next step is setting up your initial Visual Studio solution, and this is something that probably only one person on your team should do. So I don't know if you've elected a team leader or anything, but you don't want to all do this. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to make a new project, or a new solution specifically. I'm going to make I'm just going to make a console application. You should make whatever project it is that you're actually doing, whether it is an ASP.NET web app. But for the sake of this example, I'm just going to do a console application. I'm going to call this demo application, and this is going to be in my demo solution. Okay. Just do a little bit of setting up here. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and oops. Okay, well, there we go. Hello world. Save. Okay. So right-click on your solution and choose Git New Repository. Okay, and now what it's done is it's gone ahead and it's set up a local Git repository in the same folder as your Visual Studio solution. So for example, if you look at your solution here, you should see well, it's an empty file right now. But there'll be all the Git structure that you need. This extension takes care of it. So next step is we're going to go ahead and git pending changes, and all of these files that we just added we're going to select, and we're going to say something about what it is. And we're going to say commit. And that's great, super, we just committed it. But if you'll go up to Bitbucket, you'll see that, well, obviously we haven't done anything yet. Nothing's here. And that's because all the changes we just made were just in our local copy of the Git repository. So next thing we need to do is configure Git to push changes that we have locally up to Bitbucket. So the first part of that is to add we're going to add a remote, they say it, a remote repository. So the syntax for that is git remote add, and we're going to call it, let's call it origin, because that's really what it is it's the server side of it. So it's add origin, https:// then it's your username at bitbucket.org / and then the name of whoever owns the repository. So in my case, I own the repository as well, / the name of the repository .git. Enter. And okay, that's configured. So now to actually push stuff up to the up to Bitbucket, you type git push origin master. So what it's doing is it's taking your local copy of the master branch and it's pushing those changes to origin, which is Bitbucket. Bitbucket demo. Oh, whoops. That is, sorry, that is case sensitive. So we're going to do git remote help, because I want to see how to do this. Okay, so it's git remote set URL origin, and we're going to type it correctly this time. Repository.git. And okay, there we go, got it right this time. So it's going to ask for your password, and this is your Bitbucket password, obviously. And it's going to do some things, and there we are. So it just pushed our changes to Bitbucket, excuse me. So now, if we refresh our repository page, you can see there is that commit that we just made. Now I'm going to go over how to... So all that stuff that I just did should be something that only one person in your group should do, that initial setup. Now I'm going to go over what other people in your group should do when they want to actually access that stuff. So I'm going to get out of my VirtualBox here, and this is another copy of Visual Studio that is going to represent the other members of your group. Okay, so first thing we're going to do here is we're going to go open up our git bash again. Okay. Right now this is sitting in your home folder. You should change directories to wherever you want to store your local copy of the project. I'm going to go to the desktop because that's an easy place to remember, but you can certainly store it in the Visual Studio project folder. You can store it in your documents. It doesn't really matter. So now that I'm here, I'm going to do git clone, and then we're going to type in the exact same thing that you would have typed if you were making the repository. So your username at bitbucket.org / and then the owner of the repository / the name of the repository, repository.git. Then you enter your Bitbucket password, and it does some things, downloads stuff, and on your desktop, which is kind of a mess, you should see that I have a folder called demo repository. There it is. Okay. Just going to open that up and open up the solution file. There we go. Okay. And it's loading the projects. And you can see that our Git windows have opened again here. And this is because Visual Studio has determined that the project that we opened has a Git repository associated with it. So now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make a change. As soon as it loads here. Okay, there we go. I'm going to make a change. I'm going to call this hello. Oops, I guess I opened it twice. That's probably why it's taking so long. Okay, there we go. Can change this from hello world to hello Nebraska. I save that, and you can see over here in your Solution Explorer that there's a little check mark by the file I just changed, and that is indicating that I modified it. All my other files have little locks by them, which indicates that they are in the repository and have not been changed. If you add a file, it'll have a plus by it. If you delete a file, I think it'll have an X by it. Actually, let's go ahead and add a file. So I'm going to right click on my project and I'm going to add a new class here. And let's call it, I don't know, foobar.cs. Doesn't have anything in it, that's fine. Now, a really, really, really important thing to remember when you're adding or removing things from your project or solution is to always, always build before you check in. Now, why is that? That's because your project file or your solution file won't change until you build. So had we checked in and not built, other people who would have checked out the solution would get foobar.cs, but it wouldn't show up in Visual Studio because Visual Studio wouldn't have associated it with the solution. So now that we've made our changes, let's go ahead and go to Git Pending Changes, and here are the things that we did. We modified program.cs, and you can see that how the file has been changed. You can see that we've added a new file called foobar.cs, and you can see that we've modified our csproj file. And this is the really, really important one. If you modify a csproj file or a .sln file, always check that in, or else really kind of bad, strange things can happen to people that also check out your things. So we're going to add a commit message. Always make sure you add a commit message. Always. We're going to say we changed program.cs output, added foobar.cs. So we're going to go ahead and commit. And now, like before, nothing is going to show up on bitbucket.org until we go to our git bash and we type git push origin master. So once again, we are pushing the master branch that we're on right now to origin, which is set up already to point to Bitbucket. So we enter that, we enter our Bitbucket password, thinks about some stuff, and it says my user is allowed, and it's accepted the payload, which is awesome. So now if we go to Bitbucket and take a look at our most recent commit here, you can see my name is showing up as it has a question mark by it, author not mapped to Bitbucket user, and that's because the email address on this computer isn't associated with my account, but I'll have to go in and change that later. And you can see all of our changes that we made here as well. So now that I've committed things here, how do I check them out back in on my original account? So here we are in my, let me full screen, in my VirtualBox again. This is our first computer, and I right click on the solution, and what I want to do is open up the git bash again. I'm going to do git, it's almost exactly opposite of pushing. You're going to say git pull from origin the master branch. And once again, it's going to ask you for your password. And it says, yep, it's pulled all of these things, and it's updated your local copy to be the same as the one on the server. And Visual Studio is going to say, hey, the project's been changed because I added a file. So you're going to say reload the project, and there it is.